Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. What if I talk really, really, really quietly?
Even worse then.
Okay, perfect.
All right, so one is not. Is it just switched off there? Or is there anything silly like that? Extra sketchy. Oh, where's this little doodad coming out? Covering up something? Should I put it in here? There was a little thing on here, but it's like not really a, not a switch. It looks like it's doing snacks. Okay, there to switch it off in there, and make it possible for us. We really need. I guess it could sort of blend around the foam a little bit, because we might need to go. This, a little bit. One more second. Just look. This is legit. One. I mean, we can try switching. Just one and two, two and one. Oh, wait. This is showing channel two.
I'll give you guys like a rundown.
Oh, sorry. I was like, oh shit, is this one on the ground? Sorry. Sorry, listeners.
I hear you though.
$5,000.
It's real loud.
Right?
So did you think about the, did you think when you volunteered for snack, did you want to look at the around that?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I grabbed the best snacks and right now, like that cider looks.
I didn't take a deep breath and appreciate them for what they were.
Well, good cooking.
Maybe we'll hear about it.
Well, no, I tried to
You'll already be moved on.
the ones on the outside, because they're the ones that will usually push them to the side, and stack up all the inside chairs, and then push the chairs back to the middle. So I have a put back.
It seemed like a poor design
Yeah,
if
it's
they made it
just
so that you could like mistakenly move the little dip switch or pull up your equipment. It's kind of a bad build. That'd be bad. Whatever, Panasonic.
Yeah. I'm gonna get some food.
Let me get you
What else is there?
Is that it?
My computer's still sitting over there.
Oh, I just wanted to.
Yeah. And I can make sure that.
Is this yours?
Yeah.
Okay, should I do mine since you're gonna do mine?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I'll be back to get the camera and stuff at this point. So. But I'm just making sure it's on YouTube is all I'm doing right now.
not even be doing that.
So at least like here.
Let's check.
Let's see if anyone charged this.
So we want to have meetings.
Right. The other side of it was, somebody said it when I bring it up to the last term meeting, that, oh, you
This is
checking another email? I don't think that's healthy.
This is from eBay.
Something like that. That's the downside of it.
And, yeah.
That make it, that make it public.
Email
I didn't know you brought it.
is
Channel 17.
a different standard too of like information of Freedom Act and.
Right. Well,
It's gotta say, Channel 17 is live. Yep, live now. Ooh, so is the planning commission. Come on, guys, we have a
have
fun. That's all six.
comply with open meeting laws and
That's all the way that's.
It's-
That's
I think
where
they
it
would just
was
show
like really, have a public body of.
One is watching.
Oh, it's on like a serious line.
Myself.
Because you get more.
Yeah, it's like at least a
And
30 to 40 seconds.
You know, like, transparency.
Kind of varies, but
Now,
I think that's what it
my
is.
is every time you guys move. like,
Okay, now you're here.
That's not what I'm telling you, but it's really like, it's hard to,
No, I
you know,
mean-
where it's
All right.
our
It's
own
working.
body.
So then I just use that.
You know, like, I feel that, if that's something,
And then we'll
yeah,
we'll
I'm
plug
not gonna
in
put myself in a position
to do like the presentations and
take
stuff.
you guys down.
Is that
Oh, yeah, right.
just all then?
Okay, so we had problems with that.
You have to like down.
They cut this little thing off of here. This is like
theoretically though, we also.
USB extender that goes up to that little computer.
Okay.
Hopefully nobody might have to be this long, but
Right?
Yes.
No, we need.
I don't know where to put the extra in
Yeah,
there.
so steering committee members are meetings.
So I don't, maybe GM, we'll just leave it. Maybe GMP will, do this.
Okay,
Yeah,
so they will look into that.
before.
Will they use that or they'll use like the web, the one where you pull it down? I don't know.
On the website?
Usually,
It has.
they'll let you know or follow up, you can ask them, you know. Otherwise, we'll just figure it out here.
You don't like publish it.
Power switch is the top of the little thing, it's just over here, just sort of in the back of the field forum. Windows computer. I think this is supposed to switch between the computer and other things that you can plug in along the bottom. And there's like random weird cables. I think they're still in this
I
cabinet.
also was like the one with the.
Hopefully that won't come into
the
play,
one that
but-
was designated to Warren. So,
Yeah, we just settle on one
for
standard.
next year, designation, you know, like,
Never
and if you have a standard.
Yeah, okay.
You always.
Really just-
For example, and you're doing like a standard.
It could be like.
Only one time did anybody have something that was one run. And usually they just give you the presentation on USB or go on the web browser.
You know, so there's
Right,
all.
yeah,
that.
Usually doing that, like just send me the presentation, I'll put it in the drive and we'll bring it up on the.
A
Can you
couple
just like plug it into
things
like the TV specifically? I guess that's my question, it's like, is
This goes into the computer. So you're supposed to log into the computer.
This is attached.
Yeah, this is the keyboard for it.
And
And
basically.
the password is on the
the
wall.
ones that, like, we
That's
approve
broadcasted
the
on
agenda
television.
and,
Right.
You know, next
So I need to
month
go
we'll
other
discuss
person.
this.
Right.
And I think it
So
was.
it doesn't have to
Community
be
guest.
plural, but, we are going to.
Password is ampersand, capital O, of ledge with 3 is the last name.
And those
You get all that?
Put out.
Internet? Great. I'll have to change it.
Put out where?
It's the same process as like the
No.
NPA, you said it to me.
It always does that to bug me during the meeting, so I'm glad we did it right now.
Yeah. Right.
It's like,
Okay.
takes 5 minutes to open. Then you get Windows. It's like Windows 10, Windows 10. It's gonna be the entire open forum where we just. Thank you. Sorry, cut you off.
How you doing?
Which is not to say you have to put it in there, because you now
No, there was one side. I think it allows for it. But it's a good idea. Look at it.
It does, it just is. But I know some places that have
vice president?
No, I'm actually.
Don't feel like you need to stick around.
It's too,
I'd be happy to bump you up towards the front.
You can do that, fine.
Okay.
If not, I
Okay, yeah, why don't we do that?
Okay.
Okay.
I printed out some of the bylaws in case people wanted to read it, so I don't know if you want to. I mean, like, it'd be good to argue, but you can't. It's just nice for us to know how many seniors are coming so we can live stream. I should talk to them. We probably have some,
She's been really good, like, she's so ahead of the game that, like, I can't keep up.
Yeah, so that's why I've been like, you're saying.
Yeah, she does.
It's all taken care of.
She's great.
Really happy to
And our, young commissioners have been great too. Yeah, they've gone to their second meeting, so, yeah.
Yeah, so we,
It's all coming together for,
yeah, like trying tomorrow, we're gonna talk about orientation.
yeah.
And so we'll invite the interns and have it where, you know, they're getting this.
Yeah.
That's a program. Yeah. Happens been where I got really so that's why I was putting it
All right, I think we'll probably go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here. I know that what oftentimes happens around this time of year is when it's like 65, 70 degrees. For once, yeah, that numbers drop off, but I'm pretty happy with the number of people that are here tonight. So thank you all for being here as opposed to down at Oak Ledge or, you know, spending some time outdoors. My name is Ben Travers. I'm a member of the Ward 5 Steering Committee. We're engaging in an additional effort now to try to begin the meetings by going around, and again, I think we have a manageable enough group such that we can go around for folks to just introduce themselves, and then we'll get the agenda going. So, do we start here?
Sure. Hi everyone, my name is Brian Davis. I work at the Regional Planning Commission.
I'm Scott Pollack. I'm the third steering committee. I live down on St. Paul Street.
Do you girls want to introduce yourselves?
My name's Mirabelle.
Hey, Mirabelle. No? I understand.
Steve Cross, I live in Red Rock.
My name's Gretchen Bailey, I'm also living in Red Rock.
Gordon Dragoon. I'm also in Red Rocks.
Ashley Levitsky, also steering committee member, and also live in Red Rocks.
Well, I'm Spencer Smith, I live on Flint, across the street.
Yeah.
Co-op.
Not Lewis.
I'm Marcia Gustafson, and I live in Red Rocks.
You're on the back.
Hi, I'm Rachel Libby. I'm here to speak for Green Mountain Transit, and I actually just live up the way.
Thanks, Rachel.
I'm Mary Danko. I'm the director of the Fletcher Free Library. I live in Minnesota.
You're welcome. Everyone's welcome here.
Just the speaker.
Right.
Hi, I'm Mohammed. I live on Pine Street, and I'm a steering committee member as well.
Pitt?
Hi, my name is Pitt Kamayvan. I work for CETO and I help with NPA staff support.
I'm Lauren. I'm an intern for CETO and I
Oh, no.
Lisa Nelson, I live on Austin Drive.
Paul Smith, also Austin Drive.
Joe Gary, Ferguson Ave.
Andy Simon, Locust Street.
All right. And as I mentioned, I'm Ben. I live on Home Avenue. A couple other members of our steering committee couldn't be here tonight, Kirsten and Lucia. But we met as our newly constituted steering committee the last go-around, and I think we have a good group here going forward. As always, as of late, we're streaming the meeting live. I think we're up and running on channel 17, so if anyone's joining us live streaming, welcome to the meeting. So we'll begin with open forum. Is there anyone who has a comment for open forum? Right. And I heard from some folks last time that it's important for us to stay near this microphone so they can hear it online. So
Got it.
yeah.
Sure, thank you. Hi everyone, again, my name is Brian Davis. I'm a transportation planner with the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. I believe I was here last month and left some materials about the North and South Winooski Avenue Transportation Study. So again, I'm trying to go to all the NPAs and let people, remind people that this project is happening and that we are accepting public comments. The materials I shared last time, and I'll leave a few more copies with you tonight, we're trying to reflect back in these first round drafts to see if we did hear what people are saying in terms of different variations of alternatives, in terms of parking, transit access, walking and biking, and so on. So what we're doing now is taking comments. What will happen over the summer is a consultant team will take all your public comments back, figure out which alternatives are off the table, and then put a little bit more effort and design into some options that may have some legs with the community. We have a public open house coming up. It will be in early June. I hope to send out something tomorrow, if not early next week. I hesitate to mention the date. I've had to punt that meeting a couple times already, so I'm a little gun shy, but we are looking to have an open house at a minimum, a drop-in style so people can come at your leisure. I'll have materials at Fletcher Free Library downtown at least for a week. I'll station myself there for a few hours that week. I'll do some specific outreach in the Old North End and make myself available for local business owners to come chat with me then. I've been meeting with the Church Street Marketplace Commission, BBA's Downtown Action Group. We've been in conversations with City Market Downtown. So we have a constant contact email list. I try not to overwhelm people with too many emails, but I do have that. My contact information and the project webpage is on this materials. You can also go to ccrpcvt.org if you're watching live from home, and you'll find the Winooski Avenue Transportation Study, and my contact info is there. So again, this project is for you. It's not for me. I do live in Burlington. I do use Winooski Avenue, but I'm just a project manager with Nicole Lowe. She works for Public Works. So a very exciting and important project for the residents and business owners, so I encourage you to be involved if you haven't, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Ryan, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
I'm finding the design so far, the design options really exciting with the roundabouts and the sidewalk level bike lanes and some of the things that have been proposed. What's the time frame for actually completing this project?
Right, it's a great question. From the planning side of things, and I want to emphasize that right now we're just in the planning phase of this. So I would expect by the end of the calendar year that council would have reviewed and accepted, recommended, or however they choose to proceed with that project. And if they did accept the preferred alternatives and the recommendations, then it would be up to the city to identify funding over some period of time to make the project happen. I can't put a time frame on that. It just depends on what the ultimate price tag is and whether or not maybe it could be done in phases. Maybe there's things that could be done in the short term that may not cost as much, and then in the long term, as more capital funds become available, good. But I couldn't give you a time frame on that.
I'm just trying to figure out how long I have to live to really see.
Tell me about it. Yes, ma'am.
Are you talking about the Champlain Parkway project or something else?
No.
Okay, I was not here last time.
Sure. The Winooski Avenue, North and South Winooski Avenue, right? So beginning in the north, where it intersects with Riverside Avenue, all the way in the south, sort of the Five Corners intersection at Howard and St. Paul, where Shy Guy Gelato is. So that whole length of corridor, and as you know, it's very diverse. We have residential neighborhood on the south end, the Old North End. It's downtown, 2 lanes of traffic. So We're trying to improve mobility for everyone, make it safer. There's a number of designated high crash locations, so it's unsafe at some intersections and segments. So we're trying to address that.
And I think there's been an NPA representative on your committee. And I think they reached out to the South District, and we deferred to Ward 6 because most of the Winooski Avenue is in that ward as opposed to our ward. But I think there's an NPA rep on your committee.
Yeah, we have, rather than, the city decided instead of having NPA specific reps, it was a district representative. There are a couple city councilors on the planning advisory committee, so there is a standing committee of 12 or 15 people. You know, Rachel from GMT is on there, so we do have thoughtful people who are looking at this from all sides and all considerations as a part of this.
I appreciate you keeping us updated.
Yes, happy, yeah. Again, I encourage you to be involved. It's our city.
Right. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'll leave half a dozen of these or so over here. I understand that there's some left over from last time, so I won't overwhelm you with paper.
Anyone else for open forum?
I'd like to remind people that there are snacks in the back.
Yes.
And they're great snacks.
Snacks in the back. Thank you to Mojo. All right. So next up on our agenda, we had a discussion scheduled on our bylaws, which we had in our last agenda, but because we have both Rachel and Mary here already, unless people are really burning to get to the bylaws right now, I was thinking maybe we could move those towards the end and provide Rachel and Mary an opportunity so Mary can get back to the new North End. Are people okay with that, or were there people who wanted to do the bylaws up front? Anyone opposed to that? Okay. So Rachel, you were first up on the agenda. Are you okay with coming up now, and Mary will go to you? Okay, great.
I do apologize, my allergies have been terrible this season and I just am working through that haze, so if I can't hear you, I apologize. So I didn't bring a presentation. I know I presented to you guys maybe 4 or 5 months ago about kind of the planned changes. Not too many updates from there. I did bring, we have a mock-up of the bus mapping guide. I could just spread this out if you guys want to take a look at it and ask any specific question. It's really up to you. This is kind of an open. I can go over a little bit of what, you know, we just completed a huge service restructuring. It's going to be implemented on June 17th. Not a lot of changes about routes in this area, but we are changing headways. So we're moving away from sometimes, you know, 9 to 11, 3 to 5, we'll have 15-minute service, and the rest of the day we have half-an-hour service. What we found is that by moving away from the peak service and offering, say, 20 minutes all day from 6:30 to 6 p.m., it's actually more efficient, and we can provide 46 trips per day on a route versus 32 trips per day on a route for the same cost. And so that's what you're going to see across the whole system. The trunk routes, which is Shelburne Road, you know, it goes from the museum into the DTC. North Ave down from Northgate to the DTC. The Essex and the Williston routes are all our trunk routes, so those routes will all have 20-minute service. Pine Street and Winooski will have half-an-hour service most of the day, moving away from 15-minute service. We've just found that we can't keep to the schedule anyway, so we're looking at how do we get there when we say that we're going to get there. Some other big exciting things, something I'm personally very excited about, is we are going to have mobile ticketing. To remember to have cash on you. We will have mobile ticketing is you just open up the app, you can buy a ticket, you click it, the driver sees it's active, and you go on your way. So if you show up at a stop, you don't have to have $1.25 or a 10 path or a monthly or what have you. We will have new automatic vehicle location app. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Route Match app, which is our old and the ongoing issues with that, yes. So we're very exciting to be moving to a new vendor through the Transit app. It's confusing, that's literally what the app is called, Transit. I encourage you to download it, check it out. We won't be going live until June 17th, but this is a state contract. So now all transit agencies in Vermont will be on the same app, using the same platform. So you can go ahead and check out, you know, Actor down in Addison or any of the other regional transit agencies. So that's my spiel. Updated maps, updated bus mapping guides with a new style. Yeah, any specific questions or routes you guys would like to hear about?
I really like the mobile tickets. I think that's pretty neat. Are actual tickets still going to be an alternative though? Because not everyone's going to have a phone.
So there are no plans to remove any sort of ticket services, only plans to add, that's been a pretty clearly identified need, is that you have to either be at the DTC or you have to order them online and pay a fee. And so one big push is not only to identify efficiencies in the system, but also in service. How easy is it to ride the bus? So we're trying to make it as easy as possible to ride the bus for all folks.
I'm just wondering why there's worse service on 5.
Worse service on 5?
You said you're not having the 15-minute service at all anymore.
Correct, we're moving to 30-minute service. So we looked at, we did all sorts of load analysis, which is how many people are on the bus, productivity measures. And so we took, we had to take a step back and take that system-wide, where really is there a need for more service hours? Where might there be need for less service hours? And the Pine Street corridor has been identified as in need of less service, especially since it runs parallel with the 6. And so those two kind of fall within the same service hour in terms of offering number of trips per day.
Well, maybe more people would ride the bus if it was every 20 minutes.
I agree, and if we had $1 million more, we could make a lot of things happen. So it's really a question of how do you allocate the resources that you have. Oh, sorry, guys.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So that segues into my question, which is the last time when you came and presented, you basically said, and it says on the NextGen website, that you're anticipating no increase in funding.
Correct.
For public transit. As we move and closer and closer to an impending climate catastrophe, doesn't it seem totally illogical that we're not funding public transit at
Yeah,
a much
I would say
higher rate?
if you support transit, as you should for myriad reasons, be as loud as you can in as many ways as you can. And
where should we be loud?
Yeah.
with your state legislature, with the city council, with, everywhere, online, engage. There's some interesting things happening on the transit front right now, but we are a public service provider. We are not an advocacy group, and so it's up to you folks to really be that voice in the room supporting transit.
Is it still the case that, like the city of Burlington or South Burlington, have to pay the majority of the cost of the routes that operate in their jurisdiction?
So jurisdictions are assessed on a service hour basis, and so in the Chittenden region, there are 5 or 6 towns that are members of the Transit Authority. Now they are assessed a fee based on service hours, and there's all sorts of rules and regulations about changing that assessment. On a wider basis, you have the state, instead of local organizations paying 30, the state will pay 30, the local match is supposed to be 20, and the federal match is always 50%. So that's kind of the ideal breakdown, 50, 30, 20. In the urban area, that 20 comes from cities that have signed into our transit authority, and regionally it comes from small towns doing that 20% local match in their budget.
Right here.
So I'm Bill Pelkey, and I'm a little new to town, so I don't know all the ins and outs of everything, but I'm interested, what do you guys track what the ridership is as a percentage on each route?
Which is our largest rider, against each other, you mean? Or?
Well, just to see, like you said, you made a change on Pine Street because the ridership, it doesn't warrant going every 15 minutes. So do you have for every bus, every time, what percentage it's loaded?
So we generally have route level data, daily route level data, and then a couple times a year we go out and actually count per stop what is the average daily ridership.
So do you have ridership for each bus driving down Pine Street? How many people are on that bus?
Yes.
Okay. And what is what's the percentage of ridership? Do you have do you have any sense? I mean, is the bus half full, 20% full?
So it's
across the whole system?
Yeah, that's a really challenging question that has to do with peak hour service constraints. You always have to plan a system based on what the peak capacity needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I can't give you that percentage. I actually just don't have it in my head. I could grab that percentage for you.
Okay. Because I'm on the same track as this gentleman who I've met, but I don't remember his name. I'm concerned about climate change.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I'm actually concerned about public transport as the solution. And again, I don't want to be hit by any rotten tomatoes or anything, but I see a lot of buses driving around Burlington that have a couple people on them, and the bus it's not very efficient at that load. Horribly inefficient, actually. Thank you for clarifying that.
That's the same question years ago and got a bad answer.
And for me, you know, again, it's not PC to be anti-public transport, but I'm new to town. We have one car. I've tried to move around town on a bus. Doesn't work for me. And I've tried to like go to Richmond and back, and there's one time a day anyway. I can't remember now. It's been a while since I've tried to do that. But so the bus is not working well for me, and I would ask if anybody's asked the question of I don't know what the cost of a bus is, but say it's $1 million. What does a bus cost? Do you know what a bus costs?
It depends, is my answer.
Could you buy multiple vehicles and provide better service to more of the community than having these big buses?
So certainly there's a new technology called microtransit.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's quite figured out how to make it work yet, to be honest. And LA's tried it. You know, most mid-range to large cities have tried some form of on-demand service, which is like Uber for transit. You have a shuttle. It's maybe 10 people. People say, hey, come pick me up, and it goes around. You're still not going to get the passenger per mile per gallon numbers that you're getting out of transit. And now what I'll say about transit is it's not the solution to every problem, but if you're trying to move people along a corridor service, transit is the best passenger per mile per gallon ratio.
So that's why I was asking, how loaded is the bus, say, that goes from up Shelburne Road? Is it fully loaded even at work hours?
A lot.
Is it? Okay.
The number 6 bus is very much more.
So the number 6, the number 2, the Montpelier 86 commuter, those buses often experience, can't let any more people on the bus. On other routes, it's not going to be the same because you have to have that regional perspective. Maybe only 3 people are riding that 11 o'clock trip, but if you get rid of that 11 o'clock trip, 15 people are going to stop riding the 10 o'clock bus because they don't have that guaranteed, okay, I'm going to be able to make it home. So it's really, you have to invest in a system or it's not going to work. You have to have that systems thinking when you're planning transit.
I agree with you. I think there should be more buses, but I think there should be smaller buses when the ridership is very low.
So the largest cost of transit is labor, and so it's more expensive to have a bus driver deadhead back in a big bus and then pick up a small bus than it is to circulate. And I agree that efficiency should certainly also be a calculation in these decisions, but to be honest, we're a pretty small scale, so
yep.
There's a limited amount of variables we can consider.
And again, I'll just push back a little bit and just say labor is a dollar cost, and what we're facing is more than a dollar cost.
I agree.
As a follow-up with respect to a question on new vehicles, I know there's been some discussion about there being a couple, perhaps, electric buses that we're going to come online. Do you have a timetable with that?
Yeah, we'll be getting 2 Proterra buses, I believe, in late fall.
And you know where they're going to be, on what route they're going to be placed on? Or?
I'm sure we'll be circulating them in and out. I can't quite remember the length. There's limits on which routes buses can do based on the length of bus length. I can't quite remember how many feet they are.
I have a couple things actually. On the comment of even if a bus is at lower capacity, I'm kind of of the opinion that if there's only 4 people on that bus, sure it would be more optimal if you had, say, 20. But that's 4 cars that aren't on the road. I don't know what the relation is in terms of a bus's environmental impact versus a car, but I mean, I would say that a 4-to-1 would be a fairly conservative estimate. I don't know exactly.
And I'll say the third factor that you should always consider is we're a public service. Who's getting a ride that needs to get a ride?
Right. Oh, and then a couple questions that are kind of completely
Sure.
I'm gonna start with two easy ones. One, is the app that you're using to pay and the app that you're using to track the bus's location the same, or are they different apps?
They're technically different, but they're in the same, so a little bubble's gonna pop up and say, buy a ticket,
Okay.
you'll take, I'd like to go here,
Okay.
here, and it'll.
So it's kind of in the same
Yeah.
area. Perfect. There was a second one, and I forgot it, so let's go to the last one. When Rhino Foods wanted to make some new development in their backyard, or their back area, they wanted to cut down some trees. And the city didn't allow that because that was an environmental corridor that was fairly important, apparently, to some migrating animals. I was a little surprised when I saw that the GMT location seemingly cut a bunch of trees down in a supposed wildlife corridor without, I didn't hear of anything. Maybe they got like a special exemption because maybe 10 trees is worth being able to get 10 buses out in a day in terms of environmental impact.
I couldn't speak to that. That would be a question for our capital projects manager who's in charge of, working to get permitted for construction projects.
And then last one, real quick. Are there any bus lines that are running at night? I like to drink in town.
Yes, so expanded evening service. The last trip on all routes will be leaving the DTC at 11 o'clock now.
Okay.
Even 5 will go till 11?
5 o'clock has only southbound.
I mean, the bus number 5.
Right. We'll have limited service southbound only after 6:30.
Well, that's the problem for people who want to be in this neighborhood and want to be downtown.
Yeah, and that's something that we have been in discussions with, and we're hoping to, this is not set in stone. This is something that we're going to pay very close attention to and tweak. And so late night northbound service on Route 5 is definitely one of the things we're going to be looking at next year when we have another chance to kind of mess everything up again.
A few things. One, I just tried the app and it doesn't work in this location yet. Is that?
Correct, not until June
that?
17th.
Okay.
Yeah.
And number two, following up with this gentleman, back when I asked this question, it was 5 years ago, maybe, a little longer maybe. The answer I got, the calculations I did, I'm an engineer, said that a full bus is still not as good as a Prius with 5 people in it. It still uses more energy and has a driver, which is pain. So I'm a little concerned, as he is, that this is, this has been the bus story, it's net, it's the way it works, but, we can do better than a Prius nowadays, and that's if you don't go electric. If you go electric, we can do better yet. And of course, flexibility is much better. Now, congestion on roads and people driving around with one person in the car and all this sort of thing, that starts to trade off pretty quick. But we don't ever see full buses except for a couple of the special ones. The one that goes downtown and the one that goes to Montpelier. I've been concerned for years, this doesn't make sense. And to that end, I've also built myself a small electric car. You probably see me around, so I have 3 wheels and I get about 300 miles to the gallon instead of the equivalent of 1.5 miles to the gallon I calculated for the bus, or I was told about for the bus. And it goes where I want, when I want. And I was just wondering if anybody's thinking that way at all. I know David British at one point was thinking about it, frames working on it, in fact, go back and forth to Montpelier. So there's some options there that are a little more, have potential to be better. But has anybody ever talked about things like a train that carries small pods, just little cars to get you that last mile? It's always the last mile that kills buses.
Yeah, there's some really fascinating, I encourage you, the numbers you're talking about sound different, honestly, than the numbers that I would see. So I obviously find transit very fascinating, but I would encourage you to, people have done thought exercises with all of this stuff. The age of automatic vehicles is fast approaching. Transportation is a geometry problem first and foremost. And so, I would encourage you to definitely delve a little bit deeper. It's certainly a very fascinating field.
Have there been any discussions of expanding the free College Street shuttle to have it go up, like College Street come down Pearl or Main Street or something like that? You can have the same driver, same miles, same hours, same vehicle, but cover a larger piece of the downtown corridor. And it was part of the city of Burlington.
Library in 1986, and I started getting worried about our library. So besides having the fire department next door, there are other things that keep this from happening.
It is handy that they're there, and we do have fire suppression there, yes, we do. I could actually look into it a little bit more, but yeah, we do. So, but it would be terrible. But, and thank you for all the compliments. I will make sure to take them back to the staff, because they really are the lifeblood of that library, and they work so hard, and they're so passionate about their work. It's a great team to work with.
Yeah. Please tell the staff that we just so much appreciate them. They're just such great people, and they really try to do the best they can for you. It's the one institution that really works in this city is the library.
Oh, well, thank you. That's so nice. Well, and it was interesting hearing you all talk about climate change and, the planet and what we can do. And to me, the library is it's one of the best things you can do, because it's resource sharing. So every time we share a book, right, and it goes out, 40 times or 50 times, that's less books that people have bought that have gotten brought in by trucks from Amazon. So, keep using your library. And interlibrary loan is another great, we are like, to me, we were the pioneers in resource sharing. And we keep continuing to do it. And I don't know if you've heard about, we have a library of non-traditional things now, and we're loaning out some different kinds of things, like a metal detector and cake pans, a ukulele, post hole digger, rakes, giant Jenga. But because we know that we've got that borrowing infrastructure in place. And so if you ever have any suggestions, please let us know.
Do you have a question? I have a question, which is, I agree with all the comments that were made here, and I think the library is a particularly important resource because of its free nature. It's a place where barriers are broken down, and it's a common meeting place for people of all walks of life. And where I've been able to experience that the most is by bringing my kids to the library, especially for a lot. I feel like you've been doing it more recently. A lot of free childcare, not childcare, but child educational type programming. Yeah, like over the winter, every Saturday, you had a free educational program where there was a teacher there who was actually putting on a curriculum. And childcare is an expensive endeavor for a lot of families here, and to have that opportunity to come and to have that free programming, I think was great, and it allowed my opportunity, my kids an opportunity again to play and interact with kids from all walks of life and from all neighborhoods in the city. And so I suppose my question is, does the library plan on continuing that type of programming? Do you feel like you have enough support financially or from the community at this point in time to keep that going? Because, again, as a parent of young kids, I think I can speak for a lot of parents of young kids in the community when I say it's such an essential resource.
Yes, and I think we had experimented with that Saturday program, and it was so popular. It was the first time we had done that in a long time. Saturdays and Sundays are our busiest day, so our plan is in the fall to start something up again. I don't know quite what iteration it's going to be yet, but I'm working with Rebecca on that. Right now, our big focus is summer programming. We know that in the summer, kids have what they might call summer slide, and if they don't continue reading throughout the summer, that they can almost lose a whole grade level. So we focus a lot of energy on that. So we'll be going to the schools, we provide incentives. It's a summer, we call it now a summer learning program, but we're really excited about that. This year the theme is space. And we're going to be doing a lot of wonderful things, but I believe it's on June 2nd. Is that the Sunday? It's our kickoff party for everybody, adults and kids, and we will actually have some moon rocks that will be coming and that you can come and look at. So it's going to be really cool, and doing a lot of STEM-related activities throughout the summer, and then hopefully in the fall we'll start that Saturday program again. But I'm glad you made the point about all access, and it's, we pride ourselves that it's free for everyone. Anyone can walk through our doors and have access to the library. So for us, it's what equity is all about. And if we had another hour, I could just tell you all the great stories about people whose lives are changed because of the library, because it's a place where they can go and have either a place to be or a place to have access to the information and the stories and how, you know, how our lives become so much richer because of the stories that we read too.
I also appreciated that you hosted the Green New Deal presentation by the student groups that had,
Yes,
a part
yep.
of the nationwide Green New Deal. Yeah.
Yep, I've got to give a lot of credit to our programming librarian, Barbara Shatera, because they called her up and they said, we don't have a place to go, and they wanted to make something happen quick, and she was like, we're gonna make this happen. You know, we weren't open late, she's like, I can be here, you know, and everybody just kind of mobilizes and we can make things happen. And yeah, providing that space for groups is a really important thing that we do.
Yeah.
Our NPA is fun, you'll be going to lots of them.
If they're all like this, yes.
I have one more sort of personal question. You know, I've gone in the library dozens upon dozens of times, but for the first time, last time we went, my daughter pointed out to me, as you're walking in, down on your right along the floor, there's a little ferry door into the library.
Yes.
I don't know if anyone has seen that. There's a little tiny door that's maybe 1 foot, maybe less, maybe 8 inches tall.
Yeah.
That's next to the real door. That it looks like the sort of thing you would see outside a ferry house. I'm wondering, you know the story behind it? Has it been there forever, or has it been?
No,
is it new, or?
it's kind of new,
Okay.
but it hasn't been there forever. Yep. And I don't know, I've never seen the ferries. The door just kind of showed up one day. There's actually 2 other doors in the library
really?
too,
Okay.
if you want to look
So we
for
gotta
them
go find
as
them.
well. Yep. The thing what we'd like to do is catch the ferries and teach them how to shelve books.
Yes.
But that has not happened yet.
They need really small books.
Yeah. Or they need a lot of ferries to move one book up there. So.
Any other questions? Well, thanks so much.
Great,
Mary.
thank you,
I'll see
thank you, thank you. Can I send the link to you, Andy? Okay, all right.
Yeah, actually, we'll put it up in the minutes and we'll go up
Okay,
on
all
our
right.
website. Yep.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate if you could do the survey, that would be awesome.
Great.
Thank you.
We have our Ward 5 City Councilor, Chip Mason, here for City Council.
Tough act to follow.
Yeah.
Gorgeous night. So I have scribbled down, Chip Mason, Ward 5 City Councilor. Some faces I don't recognize, but many that I do. I live on Scarf Avenue in the Addition neighborhood. Councilor Shannon, who was supposed to be here, sends her regrets. She is in the midst of trying to sell 3 houses. Must be because it's a beautiful night, who knows? But she asked me to, and I'll kick off. I sort of scribbled down some things, and certainly I want to make this interactive. I don't want to just present, so feel free to jump in, ask questions as I'm sort of going through. Big topic that I was not involved in was at the ordinance committee on changing or proposed changes to the zoning in the South End. I know some of you have been very intimately involved. I have not participated. I recused myself under a conflict of interest rules. I'm an attorney and I happen to actually represent each of the parties that were interested, so I will give a report. I did not attend the hearing, so I don't know. Elisa and Paul may know better than I what went down, but the net impact, there was a request, actually there were sort of 3 requests, I would say, impacting, one was to allow a bank, you know, I mean, this is sort of in the weeds on zoning, but right now a bank is not allowed in what's the enterprise light manufacturing zone, which is pretty much Pine Street, parts of Lakeside, and then further down on industrial. So that was advanced. It's my understanding there's a proposal, Mascoma Bank would like to put a small branch in the building on Pine Street, Maltex building on Pine Street. That did advance, so that will be before the full council. The other was the Burton's proposal, or request, I guess, to change the zoning to allow Higher Ground, which is a entertainment venue, nightclub, currently located in South Burlington. That met with, I would say, mixed. You may have a different characterization, but there were some who were advocating for it, some neighbors who were adamantly opposed. That did pass out of the ordinance committee, where it will then go to the full city council. It was a very narrow, my understanding is it allows that use, provided it's attached to a 51% light manufacturer, and it also is capped at a 15,000 square foot space. So if you had a standalone building that wanted to be a nightclub, it couldn't happen, or if you wanted to have a 20,000 foot nightclub, that couldn't happen. So that did pass. My expectation is that will be back before the council in probably first meeting in June. The other piece impacting going the other way was, as any of us who drive up and down Pine Street, which is probably all of us, or walk or bike down Pine Street, Arts Right had taken over some space that was SEBA. They had a very narrow authorization as a performing arts center to operate where they were. Because of the expansion, they were no longer in compliance. So they had come seeking some changes to the ordinance that would allow them to grow into that new space. It's my understanding that also was passed out and will be before the full council.
Was the original 5,000 feet, or was that a conditional use?
No, I think it was
No,
permitted, yeah. I don't think it was a conditional use. So for those who are interested or want to know more, either follow up with Councilor Shannon. I'll post on Front Porch Forum when it does come before the full council. My expectation is that will be in June. Bike path, again.
Before we leave that,
Yeah.
one of the issues that came up was the fact that the standard for Pine Street was, I think they said 5,000 square feet, and yet they wanted to have 15,000 square feet for industrial parkway. And I think Councilor Shannon was arguing, that it was a little inconsistent, right? And she got voted down on that. But it seems to me that 15,000 square feet is going to be 1,000 or 2,000 cars every night, in and out of there at 11 or 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning, and create a lot of noise and traffic issues for the neighborhood.
Yep.
And I hope the city council recognizes that and takes it into account.
So I would encourage those, unfortunately, because I'm not participating, I hear what you're saying, but I would, for those who are interested, reach out not just to Councilor Shannon, but others on the council who have, well, actually, with some exception, the ordinance committee, as it was made up, consisted of Councilors Busher, Councilor Roof, and Councilor Shannon. So anyone else other than those three, this is going to be coming at them somewhat cold. So I would encourage you to reach out and express your opinions to those and explain why, so they have some understanding of neighbors' concerns.
So an email to the other?
Email is great, phone call work, but your email is usually easier to get a response.
Are you recusing again? When the full city votes?
Yeah, so when you recuse, it's like for the whole process, correct.
If I could, I don't know if you want to just give your full presentation now, or if it's okay to take another
No,
question.
go ahead. I mean, will you tell me how much time I have? And I've got, jump in. Go ahead. If it's on this topic, go ahead.
We're right on, believe it or not, we're on schedule.
Great.
So.
Go ahead.
So I'll try to ask you a question that you can answer, given
Sure.
that you're recused. So, I've been concerned as well, given the placement of my house right there on Home Avenue.
Yep.
If they put a nightclub on Industrial Parkway, I think Home Avenue or Queen City Parkway, but truthfully, I think mainly Home Avenue before the Champlain Parkway is built, will be the main drag that people are using to get in and out of there. And I have this, nightmare in my head of 300 cars pulling up to a four-way intersection and stopping and going one at a time at 12 midnight.
Yep.
But my question is this, I think when you look at development in the city as of late, particularly here in the South End, it's largely been maintained to pre-existing main drags, right? So, Pine Street was already being built up as Pine Street. Cambrian Rise is going in North Avenue. To the extent that the mall is going up, it's going up downtown, right? These are already places that are heavily trafficked and to a certain extent are already designed to take on that additional capacity. When you move off of the main drag and allow something, back there, my concern is, I don't know where in this process the city finds itself, if at all, having some obligation to do something to better accommodate that use when it's getting off of the main drag.
Sure.
And so, I know it's going to go through, if the zoning is approved, then obviously Burton will have to submit an application, it will go through the DRB process.
Correct.
But my experience with the DRB process, and I suppose this is where my question is coming in, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but my experience with it has historically been, like, for example, when this building went through the DRB process, the DRB put certain conditions around City Market, but limited to this location, right? I mean, obviously City Market can't do much with respect to the intersection at Flynn Avenue and Pine Street. They don't own that land, right? So there's sidewalks around this building, and they lock the back gate to prevent traffic from funneling out into the neighborhood. Whereas I'm glad City Market's here, you know, I still look at the areas surrounding City Market and I'm like, well, the city didn't really do very much to better accommodate the use here. There's no dedicated turn lanes at Flynn Avenue and Pine Street. The sidewalks are falling apart. We're sort of playing catch up now with respect to bike lanes along Flynn Avenue. And you know, I'm sort of, where is, along the process here, where does the city step in? Because if it goes through the DRB process, now I don't know what the DRB is going to be able to do with respect to the four-way stop sign at Home Avenue and Pine Street, which is a mile away, but nonetheless will be a serious impact point of this type of project. And you know, I mean, it's spot zoning. I don't think we can really call it anything other than that because it's been specifically asked for folks who have a very specific project in mind. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts as to, is there a point along the line here where if the city needs to do something like maybe put in a traffic light at Home Avenue and Pine Street, or a roundabout, for example, or something along those lines, where that consideration comes into play?
So, before you jump in, can I add one little tail to it? I mean, it's exactly what you said, but the word planning and zoning, the title, planning and zoning, doesn't work. Planning is something you do in advance of something, not after it happens and the problems are problems. And yet we always seem to see the tail wagging the dog here.
And another disconnect, it seems to me, is the ability to condition this use on the implementation of the Champlain Parkway. Right. And having direct access onto that parkway from the Burton site. So all these cars would be able to not be on the local roads, go on and off through an exclusive entrance and exit onto the Champlain Parkway and disperse that.
Right. So a couple different answers. I mean, there were a lot of, we sort of bounced around in a few, I mean, from a like structure of city government perspective, I understand your concern, but you are correct that the DRB, you know, where you get a permit to build is with the DRB. Where you change the traffic light is not with DRB. And DRB doesn't have the right to tell the Public Works Commission what to do. So I can understand the frustration. Where that pressure would typically come from is from your elected officials. So it's the mayor or whomever or constituents telling Chapin Spencer that, you know, the intersection at Home Ave and Flynn is a disaster or is a complication, you know, for those. And I've had this conversation with him. You know, I mean, and it's unfortunately a question of resources too. You know, that they drive around the south end. You know, Public Works and DPW were being pulled in many different directions. Yes. So it becomes a priority. And I hear your concern, and that is legit. The other, which ties into the Parkway, you know, a lot of this, the planning and what we're seeing on the ground are in anticipation of the Parkway. Unfortunately, neither I nor anyone control the timing of the Parkway. You know, the joke is we're always closer to the Parkway now than we ever have been, and that is true. But I don't know, in fact, I heard, unfortunately, the other day, you know, I've been telling constituents it's fall. That's what I've been hearing. That was what the last official communication
the other day
from the director. I heard something, though, that said, well, maybe not till January. So, I mean, again, and that's not driven by us not wanting to go. I won't name who it is, but there are multiple parties who have an interest in not seeing the Parkway build, and they are using the court system, as they are entitled to delay this project, understanding that regardless of the appeals that they're filing, they know they're going to lose, but they do have the effect of successfully delaying the project. I don't think long-term that will be successful, but I think that's the challenge, which is, you know, whether it's Burton or this building, they were I don't wanna say, I mean, they would have, or potentially have moved forward regardless of the parkway, but they are done on the expectation that the parkway is coming. And it's a question of how soon, and unfortunately, I don't have control over, it's, Judge Wright or the environmental court where that lies.
Unfortunately, a traffic light at night and Home Avenue is probably at that hour, like you're always looking like.
Right.
Yeah, that's the same as his house.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, okay, I got an email, I think it was in Front Porch Forum, anyway, that they were gonna put a crosswalk, Foster Street across Flint Avenue, which is a good idea. So I thought, so I emailed this exchange with this woman, Madeline, somebody, and then there was an engineer who also I communicated with. So I said, well, okay, it's good to put a crosswalk there, but then people are going to take the sidewalk down to City Market. So I said, it seems like to make sense, you would do that at the same time.
Yep.
Oh, we can't do that until the parkway's in. Okay, I don't think this parkway is ever gonna get in. I mean, it's been 40 years, okay, and the city's changed so much that and apparently the path it was supposed to take was declared, brownfields, and the feds wouldn't let us put it through there, and then that changed, that threw out the whole thing, because now it dumps tons of cars right down onto Main Street. And there are all kinds of stop signs or stoplights that are gonna be along, it's just unworkable. So I would like to see somebody get up on their hind legs and say, we can't do this.
I hear you, I don't see that happening, that's from where I sit, I don't see a consensus on the council, and certainly not on the administration, to stop or halt the parkway. I think, we could spend half an hour, we could spend full time on the parkway, but let me finish.
I just want to add that this woman who I spoke with, Madeline, she said, I said, well, when is this gonna happen? She said, well, the parkway isn't gonna go in until 2020. Oh, last thing I heard, it's gonna go in the spring. So it's like, okay.
Well, we're in the spring. So the challenge is that, for example, that we have limited resources. So people have complained about the condition of Pine Street. There's been a reluctance to sort of spend, I have no idea how much it costs to tear up and repave. But until the parkway comes through, it doesn't make sense to spend $500,000, repaving. And part of the issue we're having, it's not just the surface, it's that when the city did a lot of our roads 20 years ago, we didn't do them right. You can't just apply the top coat. You've got to go all the way down. So there's a reluctance to start digging up until we're digging up once, and let's do it one time. So you're not alone in your frustration. There are a lot of places around Pine or the Parkway who are saying, well, we need, we don't want to wait another year or 2 years. We want it now. Unfortunately, I can't, I think we are stuck with the queue that as it is set up right now. And I would.
Why can't we just take that money and do something else with it?
The feds will let you.
There are some potential. I mean, it's unknown. I mean, there has been millions upon millions of dollars spent on this project, and it is unknown if we were just to say no, whether the feds would ask us to reimburse them for those costs that they've spent. And to go back, I hear what you're saying, Spencer, but I don't. To be honest, I don't see any. Well, I shouldn't say we have somewhat of a new council. She hasn't come up, but I do not think there is support for what you're advocating. So let me. I mean, along the construction phase, something that is also we approved last Monday night for those who are walking or bikers along the bike path. You may feel jealous as you head north. They have this lovely path sort of from waterfront north. We approved, or the voters approved with our, the capital bonds that were approved last time, not this town meeting day, but the one before, funds to complete the bike path. So we approved money or authorization to enter into contracts to complete a nice, bike path heading all the way from, where it is now all the way down to Oak Ledge. The downside of that is that parts of it are going to be torn up. So, unfortunately, in the south end, everyone needs to be not just driving or walking on their streets. Our bike path is going to be torn up. I promise you the end result will be as beautiful. There are also pause places if you've gone, these sort of new, pretty amazing at Waterfront. I think one at North Beach, to sort of pull off the path and take in your environments. There will be one both at Oak Ledge, and I think at Lakeside is the other. Those are both in the plan in addition to the wider path. St. Paul Street, speaking of construction.
If you want to go north-south, you just forget.
I work on St. Paul Street, so I have been living this, you know, every day. The current completion date for St. Paul Street is August of 2019. So don't expect it sooner than that. Budget, we are entering, so the council's been a little bit silent. We just kicked off. So the way our budget process works, there is input from the Board of Finance that sort of works with the mayor to come up with the budget, but ultimately the mayor presents a budget and the council has to approve it, sort of like at a federal level. The mayor did present his budget, and we kicked off the way we do it is sort of over the series of 5 days or 5 separate evenings. There's maybe 4 hours of meetings blocked off. Each department comes in and presents its own budget. We kicked that off last night, was sort of the general. There's some pretty good things in there. I don't know, you know, at this point in time, it's just the mayor's budget. It's unclear whether those will make it forward always, but certainly of note, there's some additional revenue or, you know, monies to be given to the NPAs. There's $10,000 for the NPAs. One issue that I would welcome your input, not necessarily tonight, but our taxes are going to go up. I mean, we have, yeah, I know you're shocked, Paul, but they haven't gone up on the general fund in quite some time. I mean, understanding we don't control the school budget, but it is anticipated there will be a general fund an increase this year. And it's smaller. When it first was announced, there was a little bit of shock among the council, like, wow, this is, you know, a 4% increase. That's pretty high. Can we dial that back down? We can do that, but it does require some use of funds that I think have not yet been debated. So Burlington Telecom is the perfect example. The city, as a result of the sale, has $7 million in unanticipated funds. The mayor's budget calls for using 2 of that $7 million. $500,000 goes to keep, you know, the increase low. Another 1.1 buys us, and it's, you know, it's very easy to sort of, and myself included, sort of push back on that. But when you really start to get into what the money is being used for, it becomes a little harder. Of that of the funds, 1.2 million is for 11 new sidewalk plows. Apparently, we have 12 sidewalk plows. All of them are 15 years past their useful life, and they spend 50% of their time being, you know, in the shop being fixed, which creates problems. So when, you know, does it make sense to spend money? Of course, if we had the money. So one issue that the public will have to debate and the council will have to decide is, what do we want to do with the $7 million that we have from Burlington Telecom? There is an option to roll, everyone may remember or may not, we negotiated an opportunity to get a board seat on this newly constituted entity, but in order to do that requires us to roll over approximately $3 million. And we have the option to invest everything. There are certainly counselors, I'm not one of them, who feel that taking the full amount of the money and rolling it over into this new for-profit entity would be a good decision. I'm not there, but we have not yet had the debate with the public or as a body. The other two, I'll briefly touch on one and then the bigger. Farmers market.
Budget?
No, you can ask. I don't know that much about the budget, so.
I'm just wondering if there's any discussions at all about these long-standing money pits that we need to fill, pensions, schools. You know,
so we don't fund schools. Pensions, actually, this is a big, there's a big hit. Part of the pension liability is going up because this is something, I sat on the retirement board for 5 years before I joined the council, and an issue that was constantly being debated was there's an assumed rate of return. You know, you have a formula where you figure out how much we owe, and the assumed rate of return has been 8%. And even back, you know, when I was there, that was somewhat a very optimistic number. This budget takes it down to 7.5%, which is the first time. Again, not material, but the impact on the unfunded liability is big. I mean, it goes, I don't have the numbers because they haven't run them yet, but we had a $69 million unfunded liability. My guess is it goes up by at least 50% just based on a 5% delta on the assumed rate of return. I think it's the responsible thing to do, but there are, economic consequences for doing the responsible thing. Right. Right. So, I mean, I am better about that conversation. We have worked very hard, and it is reflected in the current union contracts to sort of move to a model, more of a model of a shared responsibility for that unfunded liability, so that it's not just 100% coming out of the taxpayer, which is what it was up until 4 years ago. It's still not great, and we can talk about how much, who should bear what responsibility, but at least it is in the contract, and it's much better than it was. So that, that adjustment is borne both by the taxpayer as well as by those paying into the system. Farmers market. I'm curious. I heard a lot from people about what went down Saturday. I mean, there was apparently a pretty significant traffic tie-up on Pine Street, both north and south. I've heard there have been mixed facts in terms of exactly why it happened in the way that it did. It was my understanding, some have reported, and they have reported, that apparently a dealer in the Maltex building who were supposed to allow parking at the last minute decided not to. Someone else said, no, that's not true. So we're still I'm trying to get to the bottom of exactly why. I've encouraged, and I think the mayor will do this. This is, although the city does bear some responsibility for this, on another level, at least my position, is this is somewhat incumbent on the farmers market. We can't just allow you to open up and have complete gridlock on the only remaining street that goes north and south. So the hope is, I think we're sort of going to wait and see how this weekend goes. Go ahead.
Just since I'm not sure when you walked in, but it might be an opportunity for Green Mountain Transit to actually provide some service.
I was here for that. They do it on Pine Street, but.
But for an event like that.
I agree that but and as we were trying to think through this too, there aren't even, even if you were to do satellite parking, there's some limited parking at Champlain Elementary School, I guess some maybe down at the park, but there aren't that many satellite. Downtown Burton, yeah.
Is the Innovation Center open for events?
I don't think it's open. So, right, that's another.
Big lot.
And I think that's if it's going to stay in that location, that's the sort of thinking we're going to have to get commitment from them and get buy-in from the public, because otherwise.
Because I know they have their gate now, so that you can't park there every time.
Yeah. And I didn't get stuck. I did go past it a few times, but for those who were stuck, apparently it was a significant, unpleasant experience.
When we went, every space in the Maltex
was taken. So at least that was not true then. Someone
it's good thing they didn't deny parking.
Yeah.
All those people.
Or maybe people just parked anyway.
What did they do? What did they do for downtown? When it was downtown, where did everybody? Or did they walk?
Parking garages.
Yeah.
Those are big. They're big parking. We're in the building on St. Paul, and there's 250 parking spots in there, and it's full on a Saturday.
On the weekends, no problem.
Right.
On the weekdays, it's full commuters and then.
Right. So it works pretty well.
Yeah.
Right.
Did you have a comment on this?
I want to circle back around to zoning when it's appropriate.
Go ahead now.
Okay. My big concern about what's happening with zoning is that the South End has just gone through, I think, a 3-year process of Plan BTB South End. That plan has not even made it to final stage and being approved by City Council.
Yes, it has.
According to everything in planning and zoning, it keeps saying draft. It doesn't say final.
We approved it.
Oh, okay.
Well, 6 weeks ago.
Okay, so they haven't even adjusted that in their own paperwork. But we're seeing a process that's gone through a lot of public hearings, years of public input, changed basically like that by one company coming in saying, I want a bank over here, and another company saying, I want something else over here. Yeah. And those things have gone against 3 years of public input and public planning. So that's where I have a problem with things. And I understand things have to change here and there, but the other problem we're seeing is that those one business who come in and say, we want to do something different, we want to change, trumps the neighbors, it trumps the citizens.
Yeah.
And, you know, why do we go through years and years of having public input to basically have it thrown in the trash the first time anybody walks up and says, I wanna do something different?
Even when a counselor, right there in front of the group, states the same thing. Yeah, she put a good statement forth.
She will carry that forward, I have no doubt. And that's a fair, again, to my point, it's a valid point, I would encourage you to reach out.
That's why I'm trying to keep it at a general level.
That was very, yes.
Well, again, so what's in the budget related to climate change, and what's the city doing about that?
The answer is I couldn't tell you 8 things. I've had a 30-minute presentation on the budget thus far, and it's this big. So I can say, well, we just approved, I don't know if you were here, there's money for the lake, ensuring that we've discovered, unfortunately, that our wastewater treatment facility plan was not up to snuff.
Right.
We just authorized a boatload of low-interest loans, which we were hoping we would be able to do through the state of Vermont in order to add people and make upgrades to ensure that the overflow events that we've experienced the last X number of years, let's just say, are rectified.
Right.
Other than that, I mean, I can ask that question and go dig it out, but I can't point to specifics right now. Other than to say, I know it is a priority, certainly, of the administration as well as the council, including some of our newest members who that is what they ran on. So I am confident there will be a continued discussion on that point.
I mean, when you're talking about replacing sidewalk plows, which, by the way, it's amazing to have plowed sidewalks. I've never lived in a place with plowed sidewalks before. It's great. But perhaps rather than replace them with a similar thing, you could be looking at something that was either more efficient or electric vehicle or.
And not city council related, but BED. If you're not on BED, I think the electric department just came out. I just got a week after I bought an electric mower. They've now just came out with a rebate for electric lawnmowers, commercial and residential. We recently pushed through a new tariff. There are a number of incentives supporting electric vehicles. I mean, I think everyone, Jenny Green and others, Jennifer Green, working on it. Like, that's our big nut, is how do we get people out of their cars and into public transportation or electric vehicles.
Right.
So those are done. I mean, they're supported through the budget, but predominantly that's more of a ratepayer issue, not a general city fund issue. So,
but if the city's spending money on vehicles, they should consider what they're buying.
Oh, absolutely.
What
Our fleet, absolutely. Yes, fair. Sorry, go ahead.
Did you have one point I didn't know? Have you gone through your list?
My last, which I would be remiss if I did not touch on, because both of the publicity surrounding it, but also the council time, are the recent publicized police events. Mr. Kilburn and then the two others based on the civil rights actions that were filed. Council spent the better part of the last 2 meetings, I think I would say, gathering facts. Expectation, we will be speaking about it. I expect the resolution to come forward Monday. And then I'm part of a very large working group that includes the administration and the chief that's trying to come up with a collaborative resolution to sort of look further at the incidents that have occurred, recommended changes to our use of force policy, looking at the racial disparity issues. But I will be the first to admit this is not going to be a one resolution and done. I expect this will be in the papers and a topic of focus of both the police commission, the administration, and the council for months, if not longer. So I didn't want to, that was my only.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure we got this.
Sure.
We have time for a couple more comments. Yeah.
What's the status of the wall? Every time I drive by, it's the same hole, day after day after day.
I have no information other than that which has been publicly reported, which is they are moving forward, and we expect, I've got the list of items they need to take care of. They've got their financing, I hope, within the next month. I mean, we'll get a statement that says we are in the ground in whatever.
Andy?
I want to take issue with one thing that you said. Sure. And I think that, for me, you mischaracterize people who are opposed to the current design of the Champlain Parkway.
Sure.
If I remember correctly, you seem to indicate that people are fighting it in court, just knowing that they'll lose.
I'm referring to one specific, again.
I mean, I'm very familiar with people
Sure.
who are working on the Pine Creek Coalition. I don't know about
Yep.
Burlington and all of that. And I
Yep.
know that they are very idealistic people. They want a better road. They don't want to build a road that was,
Sure.
was more appropriate to 25 years ago than now. They don't want to build the road and then have to rip it up to make the design changes that even Chapin Spencer thinks should be in there. And I really think that that's, it's not fair to say that it's just people who are sort of.
I was not referring to that group in that statement,
Okay.
Andy. There is an owner who has, of an adjoining property, that's who I was referring to, has challenged that we did the meeting properly. Forgive me, I'm not aware if the Pine Street again, I'm not aware of every matter of litigation that's ongoing. That was what I was referring to specifically, and not to any citizen-led group or other. So I apologize I was not intending to offend you or anyone who legitimately feel that's not the right path to go, and I apologize for that.
There is a litigation, or there is an attempt to challenge the environmental impact statement that was just okayed last week by the Federal Highway Commission, and I think it's done from in fact the noblest of intentions.
Mm-hmm.
So
I was not referring. Forgive me, there are multiple matters of litigation ongoing, so that was not the one I had in mind when I made that statement.
Thank you.
I will say on the farmer's market, I did park at dealer as well. So
You did?
They were open too. I think, from my perspective, it was just a confluence of events. It was Kids' Day down at the waterfront. It was the farmer's market down on Pine Street.
It was a nice day.
It was a gorgeous day. It was the Flint Avenue block party. It was St. Mike's commencement weekend. And on top of that, down towards the Maple King end, there's some road closures. So if you were coming from Kids' Day, for example, and trying to, get back up to Pine Street or that area, you didn't have a choice to. I think it's Maple that's closed right now. You couldn't go down Maple. You had to turn down Pine Street. It was funneling everyone down in that direction.
I am hoping that this location works out, and I hope it just takes some, all of us to get used to wait, what works and doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because it was a challenge to agree to a location and get it there. So
yeah. Well, I thought it was otherwise great. I mean, it's more expansive. It allows you more room.
Yeah.
I think it was very well executed.
Yep.
If you talk to the vendors, I think they did really good business. So
I think it was a good day.
Yeah. So, all right.
Keeps going the way it is, so the only way to get to downtown would be go by way of 189 and the highway.
Yeah.
Come in on the windshield.
I've done that before.
Yeah.
But that day, Saturday, even downtown and other parts of town, College Street up by you, it was very packed everywhere in town.
I think Champlain graduated too. So
Yeah.
Champlain, St. Mike's, it was packed.
It was a tough day.
And there's been gridlock on Foster and
Yes.
it's just been terrible in the mornings. I just see the cars just parked there because they can't move. And there's somebody coming down Foster, and I don't know why they're not going on Route 7. Does anybody know?
Because when you get up into town, then you get the closure on St. Paul.
Yeah, the challenge is when you come on St. Paul, you have to turn up Maple, which is like a dirt, and then down Church. It's not.
Yeah. There's no good way from here to there.
Well, thank you as always for your time. So we have Sam Beal here as well. We'll save the boring bylaws. We'll save those for the end. But Sam, do you want us to just go to you now and then we'll do the bylaws? Whatever you want to do. Why don't we go to you now?
Okay.
That sounds good.
You want the most boring thing to go last?
Exactly.
So you want me to go last?
Second. Sam, by means of introduction, Sam Beal, he is our Ward 5 NPA representative to the Community Development Block Grant Program. And they just recently, within the last couple months or so, right, made their decisions with respect to allocating the CDBG funds. And so Sam reached out to us to provide an update to you all as to where the money's going. So Sam, take it away.
Thanks. Does everybody know what the Community Development Block Grant is?
No.
Okay, so it's money that's fed to the city of Burlington from HUD, and it's intended to alleviate poverty. And so it's existed since as long as HUD has existed in the 70s, and has slowly but surely been brought down. There's not as much money as there used to be. So every city allocates its money differently. Burlington's unique in that there's a citizen advisory board that makes a recommendation to the mayor and the city council about how we want to see the funds allocated. Each ward elects a representative. I believe we have a former representative here. Thank you for your service. I have completed my 2-year term, so part of this is a pitch that next year, if it sounds interesting and not boring, that you may want to participate. And so it's very exciting. So we have 3 meetings. The first meeting is an orientation meeting to go over the sort of rigmarole of how you go about it. You're given a binder with applications to read and a scoring matrix to score those criteria. And then we have 2 meetings, one to consider public service money, which is intended for sort of soft services, so to pay for time, for example, for someone who might be doing work with the homeless to help them stay in their housing. And then the bulk of the money is going towards development, and that's either workforce development or real estate development. And so the split there is probably about 70% goes to development and 20% goes to public service. And that's driven by the original law. It's a statutory requirement that we follow that. And so the total ask this year was $723,764. And the total money we actually had to give out was $421,873. So we had a shortfall of about $300,000. So it was a difficult year. Last year we had not as hard a time. The development ask was very similar to what was available. This year the ask was quite a bit more. And so I don't want to linger on the poor people who didn't get money, because that's sad, and we're going to talk about happy things, but I'm happy to talk about how, more about how we made these decisions. They're really hard. You're talking about weighing early education versus preventing homelessness versus, women's battered shelter. These are all really important things, and there just isn't enough money to give out to everybody. And so in the end, in the development piece, we had about $330,000 that we were able to give out. Some of that went to the Laurentide Apartments, which is part of Cambrian Rise, which is a development by Champlain Housing Trust. It's going to be 76 units of affordable housing, so that was funded at $80,000. We also funded Champlain Housing Trust. They're doing a retrofit of older properties they own in the Old North End. And so it was a modest amount of money, $23,000, but it's meant to help some of this aging housing stock that we know we have in our city. The St. Joseph's Community Center was funded quite a lot, $185,000. That's for accessibility upgrades to that. You guys probably know more about St. Joe's than I do. I've lived here 7 years and I'm not as familiar with that building, but that's a pretty exciting project in the conversion of the old Catholic diocese building into a community center. And we gave some money to the Financial Futures Micro Business Development Program that's run by CBOEO, and that one's pretty exciting, connecting small people who want to start a small business with makerspace and the ability to build a business plan. And so those projects were all funded, at least in part, but none of them fully, because again, not a lot of money, right? Or not enough money. And then the public service was a little bit trickier. We had 190,000 requested and only 93,000 available. And so the emphasis this year was on early education. And so we had applications from ECHO, from Lund, and from Sarah Holbrook, and the DREAM program, all asking for money to support these important programs. Ultimately, we were able to fund ECHO's program, which is bringing impart new Americans into their building to help integrate that place a little bit better. And so that was an exciting thing for us to understand.
As employees?
Sorry?
You bring them in as employees?
No. Just, it was about bringing in young parents and their children who may not be in a preschool program. They're at home, and it's trying to get people out of their home and into the community better integrated and provide them with the access to this amazing amenity we have at Echo. And so we weren't able to fund them fully, but we gave them a little bit. Lund does a lot of work with early ed, particularly kids who have more needs, and so we were able to give them some of what they asked for. And Sarah Holbrook similarly serves disadvantaged youth in Old North End, and so we funded part of their program. The last piece is we did fund the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, which is run by CDOEO, and it's a, speaking of boring, it's kind of boring, but it's like you're basically helping poor people file their taxes. They tend to get a big refund, and so it's a really important program, and we've spent $10,000, and it's like you're really seeing a lot of benefit from that, because sometimes people won't file a tax form at all, and they're leaving money on the table, so we're happy to fund that.
Is that breakdown between development and public service, is that mandated?
That's statutorily required by the original legislation passed by the federal government, so yeah, I think if it wasn't that way, we maybe wouldn't fund it that same split, but that's the way it is, and our hands are tied in a lot of ways. The funding is very difficult to use. You have to have a lot of tracking of your time, and the nonprofits that use this money have to be very skilled and adept at jumping through all the hoops that HUD sets up for us. And so it's not the easiest money to use, and that's why it tends to go to the same people, or the same nonprofits over and over again, because the skill that it takes to use it is significant. So,
do you guys pass judgment on that? How do you know a priority?
How do I know a priority?
That the person is, or the group that's asking for the money is going to be skilled enough to actually do the reports at the end of the
well, Valerie Russell, who runs the program, also administers the grants, and so she is able to, and HUD does its own auditing periodically, and so if somebody had a erroneous audit report, and this happened to Youth Build actually, they weren't tracking their time properly, and so they got a warning, and that impacts our decision making when they ask for more money, because we're like, you guys didn't do a great job last time, and you didn't really tackle it head on in the grant why it didn't work, and so they weren't funded this year. So maybe next year if they can explain themselves. But it's hard, yeah. It's really, yeah, exactly. It's not the thing that you go work at a nonprofit for to do, to like jump through hoops for grant programs. No, I mean, I should rephrase. It's not the reason you want to do the good work, it's something you do in order to enable the good work. And so I wish there were less strings attached at times, but I can't change that.
So in terms of promoting your successor, to encourage your successor,
yes.
What was the most edifying part of this for you?
I think the most interesting thing is how you get 12 people in a room with different perspectives from different neighborhoods, and you all read the same stuff, and then you talk about it, and at first you maybe don't agree very, very much, and then you talk about it some more, and eventually not everybody gets what they want. There's sometimes these hard compromises, but in the end, both years everybody felt pretty good about it, and so it's an interesting thing to go through a process. It's similar, it's a lot more positive than like serving on a jury, for example, but maybe a similar process, unless it's hung.
It's not 12 angry men, it's
yes,
12,
it's 12 happy Burlingtonians. And it's really interesting to learn more about the organizations that are trying to do good work in your community, and so I would encourage anybody who's interested to ask me later if you have questions, and to keep an eye out for when Andy or Ben or whoever sends out the Front Porch Forum posting saying, anybody who's interested, please, submit an application or a letter of interest, so.
Pitt, I'm assuming you'll let us know when it's time, or Chip, I think you historically have even posted on the Front Porch Forum looking for this position, right?
I apologize, Chip. I didn't mean to
No, it's okay.
give away your responsibility. Any questions?
When you first said it, you kind of falling back what you just said, but when you first said that you were given this pile of information, sent home, read this, and
Yes.
score it.
Yes.
And the first thought was, I wonder how even the scoring was amongst all the different people that read it, or how their perceptions changed. It's like, this guy says it's only 10%, that one says 90%.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an example. I won't name the organization, but there was an organization that was asking for a boiler upgrade this year. And some people read that application. They're like, yeah, they do good work and their boiler's kaput. We need to give them the money. And I was reading it closely, and it said 14-year-old boiler. And I'm like, why are we replacing a 14-year-old boiler? That's crazy. I'm an architect, so like that felt like a misappropriation of resources, and it wasn't explained. It'd be like one thing if they were to explain why this relatively young boiler was being replaced, but they didn't. And so there were several of us who quickly brought that up, and everyone was like, oh. And then people's perception changed once they understood a little bit more. So that's the nice thing about having a citizen board with a diverse set of interests and knowledge, that you're able to suss out some of these things that you wouldn't otherwise. Because there are things that other people picked up that I didn't necessarily pick up. I wasn't necessarily looking for them. So.
Well, thanks for your
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
Yeah, no. Okay, so now the exciting part. Bylaws. So at our last meeting, we had, maybe I can even pull them up here. There's a couple printed copies over there on the table, and then we had also put something up here. If I put in enough keywords, it always takes me. Okay, so if we want to take a look at it at any point, it's here. But this was the general sense. So the last time the bylaws were updated for our group was back in 2002, so it's been 17 years. And they were updated at some point, I think, in the interim, but we maybe never got around somehow or another to printing them out. Or they got lost with
They went to CEDO, and.
she was pointing at you.
No, I was pointing back there.
Oh,
They
sorry.
actually
Let's
went
be
to
nicer
CEDO.
here.
They went to CEDO, and they never got updated at CEDO, unfortunately. And reprinted out.
Well, no harm, no foul,
Yep.
because I think we've incorporated many of the changes that happened then. Like, for example, we expanded our steering committee to 7 members when the changes were last made, and we've incorporated that here as well. But the general concept was to sort of update the language to incorporate what the NPA is now, as well as to provide some clarification in certain sections, and then to update some of the language. We used more generic gender pronouns. We expanded. We sort of had an equal opportunity type clause in here to expand it to the types of protected classes that are now covered under Vermont law. Updated some of the language with respect to accessibility at our meetings and so on. The previous iteration of our steering committee passed this with a recommendation that it be approved by our full assembly here. The current iteration of our steering committee, also at our last meeting, gave this version the same recommendation. And so I'd be happy to run through the summary with respect to the changes here, but ultimately the ask of this group is to approve the bylaws. I did get an email from Marcia earlier, and she went through with a fine-tooth comb, so thank you. But she was right, there is a couple changes, just like clerical changes that need to be made. Like, for example, we did create a new role among the steering committee for an engagement coordinator. someone who would be dedicated to, for example, being out there on Front Porch Forum on Facebook and in other areas to better engage the community and bring more folks into the fold with respect to our meetings. So by adding that position, we no longer have 3 steering committee roles, but the language still referenced 3. So I think we need to make a couple clerical changes there with respect to basically removing reference to 3 up to 8 here. But in any event, you let me know what you're interested in doing. I can walk through the summary, or if you've taken a look at it and have questions, we can do that. But ultimately, the ask here before we leave is to hopefully approve the bylaws as they've been recommended by the steering committee. Elisa?
Up here you have former preamble, Article 1 and Article 2, remove repetitive and unnecessary language. When I was looking through it, all I could find is that the preamble was completely removed and the statement of purpose was completely removed. Both of those seem to me, number 1, to be required in bylaws, and number 2, to go back to the original charter with the city of Burlington as to why NPAs exist and seem to be vital pieces of the bylaws. And I would heartily recommend that those 2 statements stay in. Because the whole purpose of the NPA is to have an open town meeting like meeting that a big city like Burlington can't have, but we can do these neighborhood town meetings on a monthly basis that other towns do once a year. And having it in writing and going back to the original charter language seems like a piece that I would really hope we kept.
So I can only speak on behalf of myself, but perhaps to a certain extent on behalf of the steering committee as well. So I would divide it into 2 sections. So the preamble had some language in there about New England being the cradle of democracy, and some language about sort of the town meeting philosophy and folks coming together in this type of format. And from my perspective, and I don't disagree with you, right? I mean, I think that background is obviously vital to why we're here right now. When I describe the NPAs to folks, I think it's Burlington's version of that town meeting culture. We're too big for a town meeting day, but we can have these neighborhood NPA type meetings. So I don't disagree that it's important. I think the general consensus of the steering committee was if folks are opening this up and reading it, to keep it sort of as short and sweet as possible. And to the extent we could remove language that wasn't completely necessary to the mechanics of operating the meetings day to day, that's why it was removed. But I hear exactly what you're saying. That's the preamble. The statement of purpose, I think that's where we saw some language that perhaps was a little bit repetitive of language that was elsewhere. We moved some of that into the guiding principles section. Like the statement of purpose talked about how the purpose of the assembly was to provide a forum for the exchange of information. And if you go back to the guiding principles that are still in there, it similarly talks about how, like the language that's still there is the NPA will provide a safe and welcoming forum where all residents are open to discuss that information. So, my thinking is that if there are folks here who are interested in keeping that language about the history of the NPA and that town meeting culture, that perhaps we could consider keeping that preamble language in there. I don't know that we would necessarily need the statement of purpose, because I think that that's largely still in our guiding principles. Of course, I might be talking over everyone's heads now because I've been looking through this also. I know it all, but
and I have to be honest, I haven't read it at all.
Yeah.
But when Lisa told me this stuff was removed, I went, having written bylaws for a couple of different associations over the years, I went, well, how on earth can you have? There's no need for bylaws at all if you haven't made some sort of statement up front as to what the purpose is. Why do we have an association? Why do we have this thing called an NPA? So I have to agree with Lisa, if it's not there, it doesn't sound like it's not self-supporting. Yes, I don't wanna see duplicate things said, in two different places, but, it's more like you need the general information and then you get into the specifics.
Yeah, to a certain extent, I think we do still include a lot of language about what are the NPAs. I mean, this is all still here about what are the NPAs. It talks about how we are responsible for resolutions. It talks about the Community Development Block Grant Program that Sam just spoke about and the representative who sent there. It talks about community engagement in general, about the educational function, about connecting community members to their government. It talks about how we're trying to better engage the community for this type of event. And then we've kept in the section on guiding principles about providing a safe and welcoming forum, about our being nonpartisan and making no endorsement of political candidates. So a lot of that information is still all in there. I think, Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the language that perhaps you're most focused on is this language right up here in the preamble, sort of about the history of, that part has been taken out, the history of the town meeting culture, the public meeting culture, the town meeting culture as being a sort of character of the state of Vermont and so on. The feeling is, yeah, sorry, Marcia.
Oh, no, I just have a comment. What confused me a little bit was it says Neighborhood Planning Assembly Members Handbook and Bylaws.
Mm-hmm.
So what do NPAs do? I was then interpreting that's part of the handbook section,
Yep.
which is not the bylaws. So, in a way, though, this what do they do is sort of the purpose that now is out of the bylaws. Do you know what I'm saying? It's two different pieces of, I think you were cutting things based on the handbook section, but maybe it shouldn't be. Are all of do all the wards have handbook and bylaws connected, or are they disassociated with each other? Do you know what I'm saying?
My understanding is that most of the NPAs actually don't have bylaws.
Oh, they have bylaws.
No, they have bylaws.
Well, they have them, but I think maybe in a number of the NPAs, they've been lost to time. When I talk to some of the other NPAs, they don't know where they are.
Yeah, I understand.
They're not that familiar.
Yeah.
I think that what we're trying to do with the sort of streamlining aspects of it, cutting out a lot of the sort of this preamble part, was to make it so that people could really, it was a document that people could pick up and say, okay, this is what it's about, and that the preamble and some of the other language that we cut out was almost seemed like a barrier to being able to understand it better.
I have to respectfully disagree, partly because there are certain rules around bylaws that are standard in law, basically, is my understanding. And you can have the handbook portion doing the explanation that goes out, but you have to follow kind of the prescribed state listing for your bylaws. You have to follow state rules for your bylaws to a certain extent. And I think the preamble is part of it. I think that first paragraph really speaks to why the NPAs exist and what we're supposed to be doing here. So I just feel that has to be there. I have 16 years of doing this. I've been coming to these meetings for over 20 years. And it really is the heart of the NPA in that paragraph.
Right.
I can't find any references online to its legal requirements.
Well, I think my understanding is there's not it's not black letter law with respect to what these things are supposed to look like. I agree with Elisa that there's often standard framework, and you do see preambles, and it dates back to the Constitution, right? The Constitution has its own sort of preamble to it all. Elisa, would you be comfortable with if we just inserted the first paragraph from New England to not practical back in and to call it the preamble such that we have a preamble in here?
Yes.
And leaving it at that? Okay.
Yes, and it gets out of the potential, I can understand why people are uncomfortable with some of the wording in the second paragraph.
Okay.
But the first paragraph really is the heart of it, and if it said preamble and the first paragraph, that would be comfortable.
Okay. Sam, did you comment?
Yeah, I guess I was curious, are you trying to eliminate these two paragraphs just to streamline, or is it because of something about the paragraphs that you feel like is not helpful anymore?
I think that it was I think I can speak on behalf of the steering committee when I say, I think it was in large part to streamline.
It's not about the content.
It's not about the content, it was to streamline it.
Because it was just interesting, because I'm reading it for the first time right now, and I'm feeling like that for someone who's maybe new to Burlington, either from another country or from another part of the country, that paragraph is not super inclusive. It makes it sound like this is a special thing for us and not necessarily for you. And that's just how I'm feeling, and I'm not trying to make people change their mind about how they might feel about this paragraph, but just a thought that came to mind. So.
Can I inject something else? And
yes.
Sort of related, sort of not. And that is that, to me, and I've never really gotten a solid answer in my book to this question, and that is, what empowers this, the NPAs? Did it come from the city government? Does it have responsibility to the city government? Does city government have responsibility to us? We make a resolution, no, they don't have to follow it, but they're supposed to listen to it. And that's sort of what formed us? Why did this, what is their connection to the rest of the city? And a lot of that comes out in the second paragraph there.
Yeah.
That if you throw that away, is this like a secret society we've got going here? How does it connect to the rest of the city?
Yeah.
I'm not saying it has to be those two paragraphs or anything like that. I just want to make sure those kinds of things are covered.
So I totally hear what you're saying, which is why we do keep this up here, right? So the NPAs were founded out of a resolution in 1982. So it was just last year, or it was 2 years ago, we celebrated our 35th anniversary or something like that at the Celebrate Burlington event. And so it arises out of that resolution. In fact, if you go to the CEO's NPA webpage, you can take a look at the old resolution. It's scanned in, and it's pretty interesting to take a look at. So so we keep it up here, and then in the handbook section, there is language about it being what we are, grassroots neighborhood organization, and so on. To put some sort of formality around this process, I would personally entertain a motion for us to reinsert the preamble heading and then the first paragraph here.
I so move.
Okay. Is there a second on that? Paul? Okay. All right. All in favor of reinserting the preamble heading and then the first paragraph here, say aye. 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 Any opposed? Nay. Okay. So the ayes have it. So that will be reinserted. And then the clerical changes that Marcia recommended, which I think is a right thing to do, is down here to remove the title officers, because elsewhere they're always referred to as steering committee members. So it doesn't quite make sense to use the term officers. Under key positions of the steering committee, just removing the word 3 here and just say these positions, referring back to the other positions here. Same thing as before here, where it says recall of officers. Again, that title officers doesn't make sense. It would be recall of steering committee members. So those are, I think, covered.
There are 2 officers in that paragraph also that you changed to steering.
Okay.
Any elected officer, any elected steering committee member will be subject to, and second or last line.
Okay.
Should end, yeah.
All right.
So 4 places.
All right. I can do a control find.
Yeah.
But again, to sort of bring some formality to it all, I would entertain a motion to make that change, which is to remove the word 3 and then to change all references to officers to steering committee members in the document. Anyone else? Okay. Any second?
Okay, so that change is made. Any other comments on the
I have
bylaws generally? Yeah, Marcia? No, please.
technical comment.
Yeah.
Now that you have 4 positions,
Yep.
there is a place that you can have a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 7
Yeah.
on the steering committee. If perchance there came a time when you only had 3, you wouldn't have somebody to fulfill all of the 4 positions.
Somebody could do two.
Somebody could do 2, although the language doesn't say that you can. You
Yeah.
can only have 1 person per position.
Well, so we actually, because I had that exact same concern, we did take out a sentence that says no person may be appointed to more than one of these positions, right? So by taking that sentence out, in
Oh.
theory, I think it implies that someone could
That
serve
could
in 2
serve
different roles.
2, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any other thoughts? All right. So
I move that we accept the bylaws as amended.
Is there a second on that, Spencer? Any further discussion on the bylaws before we adopt them? I appreciate the dialogue on it. It was a process for the steering committee to go through. We spent, actually, we rented out this space and all came up here and spent a good amount of time going through them all word by word, line by line. And so I appreciate the work of the fellow steering committee members. So with that, I'll call the vote. All in favor of adopting the new bylaws as amended tonight, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the new bylaws are adopted. Yes. I'll get a final version to you, Pitt, for the record, so we can get them up on the webpage. And we only ran 5 minutes late, so yeah. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for making note of that.
I was first time around the corner in 1970, 1978, and I was part of a special projects committee that I think dealt with this or similar